Stand! Stand! Stand!
You want to dance? Ask me nicely. Let's talk. Better listen very carefully.
No problem. You having fun?
No!
Thanks.
Okay, so welcome to episode 1 of Jean-Claude Van Damme, the podcast where we talk about the films of Jean-Claude Van Damme, because what else are we going to do? I'm your host, Marcus Jones, and joining me today is Zack Clopton of Zack's Film Thoughts and the Bangers and Mash podcast. How are you, Zack?
I am very well, thank you, sir.
Awesome. So to get started, why don't you talk a little bit about what you like about Van Damme, how you first came across him, and what movie you chose for the podcast?
Well, I came a bit late to Van Damme. You know, even though I am a child of the 90s, I actually did not watch a lot of action films as a young person, as I think a lot of people did. I'm pretty sure I saw Street Fighter as a kid, but other than that, I don't think I had really seen one of his movies until I saw Hard Target in college, which I just thought was brilliant. And from that point on, I scooped up a lot of his previous films and watched a lot of them. There's still many I have not seen yet. I admit the direct-to-video years of Van Damme's career are kind of a blind spot for me, for the most part.
They're pretty shoddy. They're hit or miss. There are some good ones there, but not many.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. But In Hell is definitely on my watch list. I hear that one's good.
Very good, yes.
Okay. But, yeah, and after that, you know, what really appeals to me about Van Damme is I feel like he's a little bit different from a lot of the big 80s action heroes. He's not so much like Arnold or Stallone or those guys where they're kind of unstoppable juggernauts. There's always a little more humanity in his parts and in his movies, and there's always a sense that he could get beat up more, if not lose. He usually doesn't, but he could. And
he usually at least takes a beating or two.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I like about him. As in addition to that, there's always a lot of humor in his films, sometimes intentional, not always, but mostly. And there's just, I've always referred to it as a distinct European sensibility about him that it's sort of hard to pin down, but makes him unique among the big 80s action icons. And I guess the movie I picked tonight is Bloodsport, because if you're going to start a journey into the Van Damme-age, this is really the place to start.
Exactly. It is the most suiting episode, not only because, of course, you're going to start with Bloodsport, but it's good that I have you as my first guest, because you were somewhat of the inspiration for this podcast as well.
Aww.
It was when I was reading through, you kind of wrote up several articles about some of Van Damme's films, and in doing so, I started thinking about all the ones I wanted to rewatch and the ones I hadn't seen, and the idea struck me to just do a podcast about it so I could make other people listen to my love of Van Damme.
Yeah, that last month I did a marathon for my blog, where I watched like 17 of his movies, I think. Okay, well, I'm very touched to hear that this was the inspiration.
Yes, it definitely was part of it, and just my all-around obsession with Van Damme, and I usually have no one to talk about it with, so I was like, I'll bring in a different guest and talk about a movie every week.
Well, and that's another thing, like, on my podcast co-host, he's a big action guy, but he's not, like, a huge Van Damme fan. I think he likes Universal Soldier, but I don't think he's seen a lot of his other stuff.
Yeah, definitely, there's still several of his films that I haven't seen, and that's another reason for this podcast. I want to eventually get through everything he's done, or at least most.
Oh, you're going to skip Mononco forever?
No, but that's why I chose not to do it in chronological order, because I didn't want to have to wait till I found someone to do Mononco forever with me.
Yeah, I saw his clip in that movie on YouTube, and that's like his own. It's like a 10-minute sequence in this whole movie, and that's his only part.
Yeah, so I might go back to that. I actually recorded episode 0 just recently, and I basically just talked about his minute-long scene in Breakin' for about 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Well, dancing is one of the Van Damme trademarks. He does it in nearly all of his movies.
Surprisingly, like, Bloodsport is kind of everything. It has just about everything except for that. One of the tropes is dancing or getting drunk, and that's the only thing he doesn't do in this movie. I will say, though, that Ray Jackson, the character in this movie, does enough drinking for both of them, so it kind of counts.
Well, actually, when I was watching the movie, I counted, just on my end, when he's running away from the military police and he, like, jumps over a fence and does a little move there, I kind of counted that as a dance move. So So there's like a split second of dancing in this movie.
Okay, we'll count it. It's for everything. By the way, have you seen that, the person on YouTube that turned that chase scene into a Mentos commercial? Because it is brilliant.
Yes, I have seen that. It syncs up perfectly.
Oh, it's so good. I really wish he just had Mentos in his hand at the end. But yeah, this is kind of the standard to base or judge most of the rest of his filmography on, because this is the one that kind of put him into superstardom, or at least got his start. And it, like I said, it has all of these tropes, and we'll kind of go through them a little bit. One of the main ones is, of course, it being Van Damme taking some sort of revenge, or the bad guy having a personal vendetta against him.
And I was thinking about, I was outside walking my dog before I came in to record here, and I was thinking about how many movies has he done about an underground fighting ring, like 5 or 6?
Yeah, no, definitely. The tournament is another big trope, and it's this, Kickboxer a little bit, but it's not so much a tournament as fighting one person, but Kickboxer 4, which he is not in, is totally exactly like Bloodsport.
Okay.
And he did The Quest, of course.
Yeah, The Quest, Lionheart.
Yes.
I believe In Hell is about an underground fighting ring as well.
It's more about fighting in prison, but you can still kind of count that, because he does fight many different people with different styles.
So the point is, it's always a good storyline for Van Damme, because obviously the appeal of these movies is to watch him kick the shit out of people.
Well, yeah, it's simple, but it's effective.
Exactly. Now, do we want to talk about the plot of this movie some? Just the general premise?
Yeah. Go ahead and take the general... It should take a very brief amount of time.
Well, in this one, Van Damme plays Frank Dux, who is a real person,
Dukes?
though how... Dukes?
Dukes.
Okay, yeah, right. Put up your Dukes, right. Okay. Frank Dukes, who is a real person, though how much of this film is based on reality is debated.
Based on everything I've read and more recent interviews with people, because like How Did This Get Made actually did Bloodsport, and the Blake Harris, the writer for Slash Film that does articles for them, he did an interview with Frank Dukes, and then he also interviewed Sheldon Lettich, who was the writer of this film and also directed, I think, Double Impact and possibly some other ones. And Sheldon Lettich is like, Dukes is full of shit on most things.
That seems to be the consensus. Dukes insists that it's all true. Everybody else insists that it's completely made up. Anyway, Frank Dukes is a French immigrant. He's in China. He's a soldier, and he goes AWOL to participate in the Kumite, which is a quasi-secret underground fighting competition. There, he becomes close friends with another fighter in the tournament called Ray, and when Ray is injured by Chung Lee, who is this giant Asian man, Frank has to go on a quest of revenge and defeat Chung Lee and win the championship and avenge his friend. That's the baseline one-sentence synopsis of Bloodsport.
Yeah, and it's both, because it is for revenge against his friend when Chung Lee beats him down, but it's also personal for Dukes because he's doing it to like honor his sensei, to honor the man that trained him.
Right, yeah, because the movie opens, it's near the beginning of the film, there's like a 15-minute flashback where you see how Dukes was excuse me, I keep saying it wrong. Dukes was sort of adopted by this Japanese man and trained in the way of martial arts. Trained how to do a split.
Oh, and there are many of them. That's the thing, all the tropes that this movie hits hard. So another one is kind of involving his nationality. This is one of the few movies where his nationality kind of makes sense, at least within the terms of the movie. The actual Frank Dukes, he was born in Canada, so I guess, it kind of still works. It says on his website that his parents were Holocaust survivors, and then they immigrated to Canada, and he was born in Toronto. So it's a little bit different in the movie, but at least it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, they always have to find some way to justify Van Damme's accent, and usually he's French-Canadian or he's in the Foreign Legion or something like that, though in some movies they don't even bother with that.
I kind of like that better, when it's just no explanation whatsoever. Kind of like the Schwarzenegger thing, when they just don't bother explaining it.
Right, Schwarzenegger is always playing characters with names like Ray Johnson.
Yeah. Exactly, so it works in this film, definitely. Of course, yeah, the splits is one I counted 5? No, actually, I counted 9 in this film.
Okay, I've got 7 when I watched it most recently.
Well,
so.
I could definitely... some of these are more kind of splits he does while kicking up in the air. So it's, debatable. There are definitely 5 or 6 solid ones, and then some that could be considered splits.
Yeah, they really hit that note hard. They want you to know that Van Damme is very limber.
Oh, yeah. Well, again, I think it's because of that happening so much in here. That is why he does it in nearly every film. following.
Yeah, and this was his. I guess he did do some movies before this. He did like Never Retreat, Never Surrender, and Black Eagle, and things like that. But this was sort of his first lead role.
It is
right
his first
that?
lead. He did more play like villains or side characters in a couple of films, or just kind of uncredited appearances. But yes, this is the first time his name was front and center in the credits.
So obviously the movie was designed to show off his abilities as an athlete. Not so much his abilities as an actor, but...
Again, it is very rough around the edges, but he still has that charisma. He has that charm where you just kind of want to like him.
Exactly. I agree entirely. His acting is still pretty green, and it would be green for his next couple of movies. I think it's really until Double Impact is the first time you can really tell he's learning how to act. But in these early movies, he still has that kind of earthly charisma that he's very much like a lot of great action stars. You just can't take your eyes off of him. He commands the screen.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. And also something I probably should have put as a trope, because I know it's in several films, but the kind of music montage where he's sadly thinking about things while flashbacks happen.
Yeah, what's the sad... I know it's Fight for Love in Kickboxer. What's the Stan Bush song that plays during the sad montage? Is there a song?
Yes, there is a song. I don't remember the name of it. But there actually is two awesome song montages in this. The first one is the kick-ass rock song during the fight montage, which I think is called Fight to Survive.
Fight to Survive.
Yeah,
and that's
which
another
is totally
thing.
the song that's going to go at the end of this podcast.
I was really hoping you would do that. Yes,
absolutely.
That is. I actually, I know this is a little off topic. I wanted to ask you, of the two theme songs from Jean-Claude Van Damme movies about kickboxing set in Asian countries by Stan Bush, which do you prefer? Fight to Survive from this movie, or Never Surrender from Kickboxer?
Oh, that's really hard. I think Fight to Survive suits the film better, just with the Kumite chant in it.
Oh, yeah.
But there's just something so corny and lovely about the one in Kickboxer. So it's definitely... Because, again, Bloodsport is probably the best, at least of his earlier films. But if you ask me on the street, I'm going to say Kickboxer is my favorite. Then I'll have to admit to myself that it's really Lionheart afterwards, but I'll say Kickboxer.
Those two are really close for me. I think... I honestly just love the hell out of Bloodsport, so it's probably my favorite. But Kickboxer is prime Van Damme. You really can't go wrong with either of those.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think even more so, because he is very much at the center of this film, but with all the different fighting styles and all the different fighters and stuff, there are a lot of characters that take away. But in Kickboxer, it's really just Van Damme. It's Van Damme avenging his brother. It's Van Damme getting trained. It's Van Damme fighting the one main villain.
Yeah. Yeah, well, in this one, there are those different fighters, and I've always thought that this movie was a huge influence on Mortal Kombat, because you have all these, or really any fighting video game, I guess, but because you have all these different fighters with unique styles, because there's the monkey-style fighter.
Which is always my favorite. I love seeing that in any of these fighting movies. I just love that fighting style where you take on the aspects of an animal when you fight.
Yeah. And then there's there's a second giant Asian guy who crushes people in bear hugs is kind of his main move.
I do think one thing this movie missed out on is having Ray Jackson and the large Asian guy fight. Like, that should have been a battle of the bears.
Yeah, Ray Jackson, better known as Ogre from Revenge of the Nerds, perhaps.
Yeah, played by Donald Gibb.
Now, something I want to talk to you about is... So, when I was rewatching these movies a couple months ago, I couldn't help but notice the intense homoerotic subtext in Bloodsport, because it really is a love story between two men. That's what this movie is.
Yes, I suppose it is. Which I think is at the center of most Van Damme movies, because whenever he usually does have a love interest, but she's usually very sidelined and not that important to the plot at all, other than to just have someone to cheer him on and, give him a case of the not gays.
Yeah. Leah Aries plays Janice. She's the love interest, the female love interest, and she has like one or two scenes.
I did not even bother looking up her name.
Well, I've got the IMDb page right here. That's why. That's the only way I know. Otherwise, I never would have remembered. No, like her, her and Van Damme even have like it's kind of a quasi love scene, but like I said, she's just so peripheral to the plot.
Well, you'll notice in that love scene, or the aftermath of a love scene, we don't see any nudity from her, but we do see some Van Damme buns.
Yeah, he shows his ass, which he also does a lot.
Yeah, that is one of the tropes, nudity and or, fighting topless, which he does both of in this film. There is the good bun scene, and he stays surprisingly clothed for most of this film until, like, the last couple of fights.
Yeah, but once it gets to that point, I actually have a saying with a friend of mine. Any point in, like, a movie or a story, it's the end of the second act, we're about to go into the climax, things have gotten really serious. I refer to that as the moment when Van Damme takes his shirt off. There's no turning back. Now the action, now it's, shit just got real. So
It got serious, the shirt's coming off, and he will be glistening.
Yes, covered head to toe in baby oil.
But yes, going back to the homoeroticism, there is very much that, because again, Van Damme's character and Tuttle Gibbs' character, they meet and they hang out a little bit, but they become the best of friends after only a day or two. Like, the second half of this film is a revenge tale of this guy he just met, like, 3 days ago.
Yeah, they meet in a video game arcade, and he's playing Karate Championship, I believe.
Yes, and, oh, man, amazing graphics.
Yeah, and, you're right, they really just know each other, but immediately they are bros. They are blood brothers, and once he goes down, it's, now things have gotten serious. And, at the end of the movie, they actually, I believe Frank actually says to Ray that, he says, I love you.
He says,
so really,
I love you, my friend.
Yes, the homoerotic subtext is barely sub.
Well,
it's pretty much just text.
After that line, that's when Ray Jackson, he says, hey man, anytime, anywhere, any place, you need me, I'm there.
Right, I mean...
And then they bro it out big time.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, not to... And that's just something about 80s action movies. A lot of them have, like, an unintentional homoeroticism to it because they were just trying to be so macho and so manly. They kind of came back around the other side and it became sort of gay. I mean...
Well, absolutely,
like,
because most of the movie is just big, burly, muscly guys glistening in the sun with their shirts off, long, slow-motion shots of their muscles flinching and stuff.
Exactly. And, and it's like that with a lot of 80s action movies. Like, I was just watching Lethal Weapon the other day, and that's another film that's a love story between two men. It's everywhere in the genre.
Also a nice bun shot for Mel Gibson.
Right, of course. So, so I guess we should talk about some of the action in this film.
Which is good, and again, I think that's one of the film's biggest strengths, and the strengths of pretty much any of these films, even though something like The Quest isn't quite as good, but anytime you have fighters from all over the world and all these varying fighting styles that you're matching up with each other, it's always just fun to watch, just all the different fighting styles, and there's usually always a bad guy from Russia who's too rough, and stuff like that.
Yeah, weirdly, there is no, like, evil communists in this one. There would be in some of his later films, but yeah, that's not in this one. There isn't an evil communist Russian guy, though I guess Chong Li is apparently Chinese, so I guess he could sort of count.
Well, there is, I'm pretty sure he was a Russian guy. He is one, he has like a goatee and the ponytail and stuff. I'm pretty sure he's Russian.
Okay, you are right, there is that guy, okay.
He's not a big player, but he is in several of the fight scenes, and he's one that always seems to be too rough. Yeah, he does cheat as well.
That's how you know he's evil.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mentioned the monkey-style fighter, which is just... somebody I follow on Twitter posted this not too long ago, said... the post was like, Siri, where is the location of the monkey-style fighter from Bloodsport? And the response from Siri was, Sam, I can't tell you that, or something like that.
Oh, that's good stuff. And of course, I guess we do have to talk about the main villain of this, which is Chong Li, which I do think is one of the better Van Damme villains.
Yeah, played by the great Bolo Young.
Yes, which he was in, at least one or two of his... I think he's also in The Quest, actually, but I think he's in one other one as well.
He's in Double Impact.
Double Impact, that's right, yes.
Yeah, and of course, famously, Bolo Young trained with Bruce Lee, so his martial arts... bona fides are for real. And he has a lot of really good, funny character moments in this. I just love when everyone is, bowing to each other and getting warmed up, he's just blowing snot out of his nose. That's a great little touch. That's a great way to describe him, because he really is sort of like a big bull in this. And he has very little dialogue from what I remember. He has, maybe 3 or 4 lines, and I'm fairly certain they're entirely dubbed. Yeah, I am as well. I don't know if Bolo even speaks that much English, but because, he's just a huge, intimidating dude, and everybody he fights is decimated and reduced to a bloody pulp by the end. And, it's in the title of the movie right there. This is a film about a sport, and it's fucking bloody.
But even he is too much for it, because there is a scene where he kills a guy for no reason, and everyone turns their back on him.
Right, that's another reoccurring bit of, like, the 80s action movie. The bad guy is really, really bad when he kills somebody in the ring. Like Drago and Rocky IV is kind of the most famous example.
Well, exactly.
And there are tons others.
Well, I mean, of course, we're all just beating the shit out of each other, but you have to have honor, man. So I guess that leads kind of to the last and probably biggest offender in this movie for Van Damme tropes, which is slow-motion screaming.
Oh my god, when he gets the dust thrown in his eyes, and it's just like a solid minute on his face, just... it's amazing.
And just the guttural noises and faces coming from this man. But no, I counted, and I'm actually being kind of conservative with my counts here. There are a few that I counted them as one if they're in the same scene or very close together. I counted 13 instances of slow-motion screaming in this film.
Oh my god! Right, because there's definitely some screaming during the training montage earlier. When I love how they teach him to do splits. They tie ropes to his legs in between two trees.
Oh yeah, which actually I think happens in Kickboxer as well. I think they actually do stretch out his legs, except he's laying down in that one.
Yes, it does. So it's just, you always got to show off. Not only can he do all these stretches and these splits, but it's really hard for a normal person to do. So that's how you know he's a super badass.
Well, they have a 3-minute long scene in Bloodsport where Ray Jackson walks into his hotel room while he's doing splits between two chairs, and he's just over and over again saying oh, that hurts me looking at it. Hey man, come on, you might want to have kids one day.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, clearly that's something they emphasize, and though on my list of Van Damme's stats, one I have mentioned is jump kicks a guy through something, which is the only one he doesn't do in this movie. There's no projectile kicking in this film through a wall or a barrier, or banister or something.
That is very true. There is some projectile kicking just off of the mat, but not through anything.
Yeah, disappointingly, the mat does not have a barrier around it. If it did, we definitely would have gotten that one.
Well, I feel like if the end game wasn't to get Chong Li to tap out to say Mate, then maybe he would have gotten kicked through a wall or through the judge's table or something like that. But no, he had to make him tap out.
Yeah, he had to humiliate him.
Yeah.
And then the spinning roundhouse kicks are present in, I think, every single movie Van Damme has done.
Oh, yeah, let me see. Yeah, I would say yes. There are maybe one or two where he doesn't quite get to do them, but those aren't really the same kinds of films.
Yeah, I mean, even his later... I mean, even in JCVD, he does a spinning roundhouse
that
kick,
is
so
true,
I think it is in every one of his movies.
I wonder if his character in Kung Fu Panda does that.
I've seen Kung Fu Panda too, but I cannot remember if the cartoon alligator he voiced does a roundhouse kick or not.
Man, I haven't seen any of those films, but it makes me want to watch them, because I want to see... You said he plays a cartoon alligator?
Yes.
Oh, I wonder if he does the splits.
I can't... It's been so long since I've seen the second one, and I've never seen the third one. But I think he does do a split in at least one of those. I'm not sure. But its pearl's pretty small, but I mean, if you're a Van Damme completist, you should probably see it, yeah. Even though it's 5 minutes of the movie. And
even though this is completely irrelevant to the movie, really, in the big scheme of things, I just want to give a shout-out to little Forrest Whitaker in this movie.
Oh, yeah, at least we forget that hilarious subplot about the MPs chasing after Dukes and trying to get them, and they show up every, maybe every half an hour to let you know they're still in the movie.
It's almost just like comic relief.
I think it is. There's a lot of unintentional hilarity in this movie, but I think the two cops are sort of meant to be funny.
Yeah, well, I love that Forrest Whitaker's character, he's kind of the younger of the two cops, but he's constantly being cut off by his partner, and there is that scene of them eating food, on the barge over there, and just, him trying to work chopsticks and not being able to do it.
Yeah, and Forrest Whitaker is one of those actors who, no matter how small the part is, he always tries to sneak in something kind of individualistic and interesting.
And he does. He stands out very much here.
And we need to mention the way that when the two cops, Forrest Whitaker and Norman Burton, finally corner Van Damme, how he deflects them.
Oh, yes, because they're threatening him with stun guns, by the way.
Yeah, with tasers, yeah.
Yeah, and they even brought in the police chief, and he kind of walks through an alley and just takes out a couple of cops. But yeah, he basically uses a trash can lid to take them to the side, and eventually they're just like, okay, I guess we'll stay and watch.
Yeah, they just said, well, we gave it an honest try.
Which is literally the exact same thing that happens in Lionheart, except it's people from the French Foreign Legion that are chasing after him, and in the end they're just like, yeah, we'll watch you fight.
Well, his fighting spirit is so great that they can't do anything about it. They just are compelled to watch, and they realize...
It's a real Rocky IV thing. Very much so. Like, he turns them around. He turns the entire crowd around.
Well, he's never... his kung fu's never been so strong to convert all of the Soviet Union to... consumerism, not yet though. We haven't, the Eagle Path hasn't come out yet. So
it's a shame that the Cold War is over, because we're really missing out. It should start back up just so he can do that.
Yeah. I want to see him go to Russia and convert Vladimir Putin.
I think he could. Like I say at the end of the movie, he fought with inspiration and spirit.
Yeah, it is very true. Now, we mentioned earlier about the real-life Frank Dukes, who claims that all of this really happened. And from my understanding, the Kumite may be real?
Well, I think one of the things, because there is a text crawl at the end, or some text flashes that say what his knockout count was, like what records he holds, everything like that. And they say in the movie that the Kumite was held every 5 years, which I think is what he said. And so... with him doing it in 75 and 80, that would have been twice, and they said he competed in like 320-something matches. And I saw someone do the math on that, and there was like, that would have been impossible for him to actually do that many matches.
He'd have to do like, 10 a day or something?
Like 50-something a day.
Yeah, I've read some conflicting reports that maybe there was a real-life fighting tournament vaguely similar to the Kumite in this movie, but
again, it's secretive enough to where, like, no one can really fact-check it.
Yeah, and that's another thing with this movie, is, like, it's sort of a secret tournament, but then you have, like, reporters checking it out, and people reporting on it, and there are always big crowds, and it sort of makes me wonder, if this tournament is so secretive, where do these people come from? How do they know?
Also, they say in the movie that it's co-sponsored by, like, the International Fighting Association.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, like, so how secret is this exactly? The secretness seems to vary from scene to scene.
Yeah, just wherever the plot needs it. But again, yeah, that's just something that comes up in these movies. And that's the thing, the plot is simple enough and the action is good enough to where you can kind of ignore the lack of plot.
I mean, yeah, nobody's watching a movie like this for its story construction. That's not really the main attraction in the least.
Yeah, it's all about your lead, and it's all about the fighting scenes, and that's something, because I think originally this movie was practically unwatchable, because this was put out by Canon, and even Golan was just like, no, this movie's a piece of shit, I'm not going to release it, but then Van Damme actually apparently went into the editing room with the editor and, like, made it the way that turned out to be, and then got it released.
Wow, if you're having Mannheim Golem say that a movie is so bad his company can't release it, that is really something.
That is a very good point. But of course, in doing this is kind of... actually, because he was in that scene in Breakin', which was also a Cannon's picture, and I think he said Van Damme claims that it was that, plus a combination of running into Golan at a restaurant and doing a kick in front of his face, which led him to get Bloodsport, and also, I guess, 2 more pictures, because he did Cyborg and Kickboxer with him as well.
And what was the one where he's in prison? Death Warrant was originally produced by Cannon, but
MGM
Cannon went
got
out
it,
of
right?
business. Right, and it was picked up by MGM, yeah.
Ah, very nice. So I guess maybe Bloodsport led him to get a 3-picture deal, and then Death Warrant was the 3rd picture that they weren't able to release.
Right, yeah, I believe so. Anyway, yeah, he's always said that that's how he tried to get roles back in the day. He would, like, do splits and kicks in front of producers and movie stars and hope they liked him enough to put him in a movie.
And not just call the cops on him.
Yeah, try that today, kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, so clearly Bloodsport is a classic in my brain. It's sort of a monument of unintentional hilarity in a lot of ways, and I mean that as a compliment. Like, I know we say the movie's cheesy, and we laugh at the cheesiness, but it's the kind of cheese that is incredibly endearing. The way that many of the great 80s action movies were. Like, aesthetically they may be lacking in value, but their entertainment value is just through the roof.
Well, absolutely. And like I said, this is kind of the height that you will judge all future Van Damme films and just a lot of, fighting action films on. Like, if it can reach the level of a Bloodsport, then it's done its job well.
Oh, yeah, and that's another thing. Like, how many, in between this and Kickboxer, how many rip-offs were produced? Like, how many...
many
like
in their
the
own
90s
series.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, yeah. How many martial artists with weird accents got movies just based on the fact that Van Damme was huge?
Hey.
Like Olivier Grunner and the dude from the American Kickboxer series, all those guys.
Michael Dudikoff had a career. I don't know how.
Yeah, Don the Dragon Wilson, all those guys.
Oh, man. I do have a soft spot for Don the Dragon Wilson. He has never really been in any good movies, but I do have a soft spot for him.
I have a soft spot for all of those guys. Yeah. Like Lauren Avedon and all these people who are terrible actors in terrible movies, but I just kind of love them.
I'm just saying, you don't make 7 Blood Fist movies for no reason.
Yes. Oh, 7. Anyway,
I'm pretty sure it's 7 is the final total on that.
Oh, man. And he's in all of them. It's not like with the Bloodsport series where,
But he
Van
never
Damme's
plays the same
one.
character. He's a different character.
Yeah, what's
in
the
every
plot?
film.
What's the plot thread running throughout the Blood Fist franchise?
Fighting movies. The end.
Yeah, and it's not even like with this series. Was Sasha Mitchell in all of the sequels? I guess he was.
Except for 5, which had
Mark
Dacascos,
Dacascos.
yeah.
Oh, of course. And then Daniel... Oh, no, that was Kickboxer.
Yeah, that was Kickboxer.
Sequels.
Bloodsport, there was only 2 sequels, or were there 3?
There were 3, and they all had Daniel Bernhardt in them.
Okay. And that's the thing, I guess, until Kung Fu Panda, Van Damme had never been in a sequel to one of his own movies.
Yeah, well, he did Universal Soldier: The Return.
Yeah, I guess that counts. Yeah, I guess that's the only series that he actually did do all the sequels to, minus the 2 direct-to-TV ones.
Yeah, I've never seen those direct-to-TV Universal Soldier movies. Have you?
I haven't, but I know this... Oh, well, I think 2 and 3 both have Burt Reynolds in them, and 2 has Gary Busey, so I kind of want to.
Yeah, so that I thought, okay, they're not high on my list right there. Anyway, that's a podcast for another day. We'll definitely talk about those.
Okay, so final Van Damage rating on a scale of 1 to 10.
Oh, God. I mean, if we're just rating it on the Van Damme, Bloodsport's got to be a 10 out of 10.
Exactly, 10 out of 10. And basically, I will say this is the scale. It's a Van Damage scale of 1 to 10 or derailed to Bloodsport. So we'll kind of start rating them in between there and see where they land.
Derailed is the bottom layer.
That's the number 1 right there. That's the only one I am dreading doing an episode on.
That's basically Die Hard on a train, right?
Yeah, that's actually the first thing I ever wrote for Crest Celluloid was my Die Hard ripoffs column on Derailed.
Oh, you have a whole column about Die Hard ripoffs?
Yeah, I've done, I guess only 2 Van Damme movies. Because I did that one and I did Sudden Death.
Yeah, Sudden Death, of course.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love, we did an episode of our podcast about the Die Hard series, and then we talked about all the ripoffs and things like Skyscraper and really dire stuff like that.
I did Skyscraper as well.
Yeah, but no, when it comes to, just Van Damme, Bloodsport is a 10 out of 10 because it has everything you basically want. Like I said, he doesn't jump kick somebody through something. But other than that, there's a little bit of dancing, lots of screaming, lots of splits, lots of shirtlessness. He shows his ass, he has a bro dumb, he seeks revenge. What more could you want out of a movie?
Absolutely nothing. So I think we just agreed here. Bloodsport is a perfect film. No one ever needs to make another film again. We have what we need.
Right, yeah. This is the peak of humanity. Pack it up.
Yeah. Citizen Kane can go eat a dick. I'm watching Bloodsport.
I feel exactly the same way. Citizen Kane, okay, yeah, sure, it invented modern cinematography, but, does it have somebody getting kicked in the face 100 times? Well, then I don't want to see it.
There is no montage set to fight to survive, so I want nothing to do with it.
Right, does Orson Welles do a split in that movie? Nah. Then this one's better.
Okay, so, Zach, as we wrap it up, plug what you gotta plug. Where can people find you?
You can find me at zacksfilmthoughts.blogspot.com. That's Z-A-C-K, filmthoughts.blogspot.com. I have my own sort of audio show. It's called The Bangers and Mash Show with the letter N instead of the word and. You can find that on YouTube.
You're so edgy.
Let's see, what else? Let's see, I've got a book on the Kindle Amazon Marketplace called Last of the Monster Kids, if anybody wants to look at that. I think that's pretty much all my pertinent projects. Oh, and I'm on Twitter, @LastMonsterKid, and I plug everything I do there, so that's an easy way to find it.
Good stuff. And I want to thank you for being my first guest on this. I have a feeling I'm going to have you back because I doubt that many people want to talk about Van Damme with me.
Oh, I definitely want to come back for the Kickboxer show, and I gave you a list of like 12 movies I want to talk about. So.
Also, just at the end, I do want to say, wasn't it you that sent me the Van Damme chain link email?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay, maybe it was someone else, but I thought it might have been you. But there's a guy that every Friday he sends out a chain email that just is full of a bunch of like Van Damme pictures and GIFs and stuff like that, and it's amazing. And I reached out to him, and he's going to be a guest on this as well.
Oh, fantastic!
I'll send you the link.
All right. Well, yeah. So, are we done, or have we have we both tapped out on this one?
Mate! Okay.
All right.
We're good.
I'm taking hold of